My name is Ali Tabrizi. Some of you may know me online as the Friendly Activist, and that username actually came from a nickname I got because of my approach to activism in the streets at protests, where I often went up to strangers and spoke to them one-on-one in a friendly and educational way, while simultaneously shoving a slaughterhouse video in their face and asking them to consider, making a lifestyle change. And I thought it'd be a good idea to show you all of this in action, so you get a good idea of what it looks like. So, can we play the video? So I'm at the slaughterhouse demo and I found some people from Spain. Hello.
Hello.
They're all McDonald's.
Little do they know that I'm about to show them a video of a slaughterhouse that they've agreed to watch, okay? Let me find this video for you.
I don't like this video. Don't need more. I'm vegetarian now.
So the guy said he's vegetarian now, and we got speaking to them, and basically they all kind of agreed to look into veganism more, and this seriously works. Like, I do this all the time at protests in London, and I find walking around, speaking to people, being educational and friendly does work. Now I'll be sharing a little bit about my personal journey of finding veganism and activism later on, but for now I thought I would set a slightly more serious tone and reflect on the fact that as we gather at this event, we are all facing a major problem. One of the most haunting quotes I ever heard was from Philip Wallen, who said that at our current rate of environmental destruction, no child under the age of 5 will ever make it to retirement age. It's a mathematical impossibility. This environmental destruction could be the biggest problem any generation on Earth has ever been presented with. It might be hard for us to conceptualize the scale of this issue, but I believe putting things into perspective can be one of the most powerful tools we have for inspiring change. Right now, we are actually undergoing the process of the 6th mass extinction of this planet's known history, and no one is really talking about it. In the last 40 years alone, humanity has destroyed over 50% of the world's wildlife. That's just in 40 years. To give you some perspective on that, if the Earth was only 12 hours old, humans appeared just 10 seconds ago, and in a fraction of a millisecond, which would be 40 years, we've destroyed half of the world's wildlife. Let's see. Okay. Every second, an acre of rainforest is cut down and up to 100 species are lost every single day forever. The leading cause of this deforestation, amongst other reasons, is animal agriculture. Around 90% of the deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, for example, has occurred to provide the land to grow the feed for livestock, or cattle ranching as it's called. Of course, other things like transport emissions, energy production, the expansion of cities, construction of highways, and the corrupt actions of corporations and governments have major impacts as well. Not to mention the greed for money and its greater ramifications. But no single industry is as devastating as the one that raises trillions of thinking, feeling animals for slaughter every year, and it's completely needless. Since it takes more food, water, land, and energy to raise, maintain, transport, and kill all these non-human animals than it does to meet the needs of the entire human race. It's not only the #1 leading contributor of human-induced climate change, but also the leading causes of oceanic dead zones, species extinction, greenhouse gases, and habitat destruction. Today, right now, millions of land animals and billions of marine animals around the world are being killed for nothing more than to be made into something that goes in between 2 slices of bread or a pair of leather shoes. And yet we have the arrogance to call our own species intelligent and compassionate. Our actions speak louder than words, and the environmental impact our actions are currently having is literally breathtaking. Around 30 to 45% of all the Earth's land is used for animal farming and growing their feed. And you don't have to take my word for it. I can show you the satellite video from Google. If I can go to the next one. This video here, if you can play that one. Okay, so anyone can do this. If you just go onto Google Maps and just zoom into at any point, this literally took me 2 minutes to do. I didn't even know where I was zooming into. It ended up being near Amarillo in Texas, and you start seeing all these rotational crops. Now, just remember that around 70% of all the crops in the United States go to feed livestock animals, who inefficiently convert that into animal flesh and secretions that are not healthy for us. If the United States diverted all that grain to feed livestock, diverted all that feed to humans, we could feed an extra 800 million people. And bearing in mind that the entire population of Europe is only 742 million. So we could feed the whole of Europe on the grain that they feed to the animals. And also understand that around 8 million people die of hunger every year. You can see these feedlots, and in a minute you'll zoom into some cows. These are all cows there, and that's their sewage waste here. If the US alone could end, if it could divert that to humans, we could end global hunger 800 times over with no extra work. So this is not a lack of food issue, this is a lack of management issue. And so we have to stop filtering plants through animals because we're losing nutrients there. 82% of the world's starving children live in countries where food is grown to feed livestock. And it's the same in Brazil. I just zoomed into Brazil, and you typically think of it as a very dense, luscious habitat. And you can actually see the lighter shade of green here is all deforested land. And the more you zoom into it, you more realize deforestation is a real thing. It's not just a number. I can say 90% of the deforestation in the Amazon rainforest has occurred through animal agriculture, but it's not until you start looking at the effects of it, you start seeing how real this issue is. And I've actually zoomed into here before, after this clip, and I actually started seeing like chicken factory farms and stuff like that. And all this land is being cut down, and what they do is they plant genetically modified soybeans, and then they feed that to livestock animals, and then I think it's about 95% of the world's soy goes to feed animals. So we're literally destroying the Amazon rainforest for a Happy Meal, effectively. Yeah, during the Ethiopian famine, countries were reported as still exporting grain to animals so that people could eat their flesh. I think we can skip this video now. We can stop the video. Okay. So if aliens were to ever visit us, the first thing they would see from space are the crops we feed to the animals we kill. It's a crazy concept we don't like to think about. We are turning this little blue dot in the universe into a factory farm bloodbath mess. It's a huge amount of the planet's resources and animals being dedicated to provide a food item that is cruel, unhealthy, and unnecessary. We are literally destroying this planet to supply the demand for people who believe eating animals is okay, their right, or their personal choice. And I was one of those people not long ago. Did you also know that on this mostly blue planet, we've only explored around 5% of the oceans? And yet every day we trawl the unknown and unseen seabeds around the world, destroy precious and fragile ecosystems, demolish coral reefs, interfere with the role of phytoplankton, which, by the way, produce up to 80% of the oxygen in the atmosphere. We pull out up to 2.7 trillion fish from its depths, up to 40% of which is bycatch and is thrown away, and another 30% is sent for livestock feed. So would you believe that factory farm fish, cows, pigs, and chickens are now the world's biggest oceanic predators? And the rest is all for the sake of a piece of fish to lay limp on our dinner plate. Not to mention the suffering these animals go through every day. All the cholesterol, saturated fat, carcinogenic animal protein, mercury, PCBs, and bacterial content, making it virtually poisonous anyway. Fishermen kill around 650,000 dolphins, whales, and seals per year by accident. 40 million sharks are killed for the shark finning trade, you can see here. And another 60 million sharks are caught as bykill in fishing nets. So if we are really to be concerned about marine species conservation, we must ban all fishing. These animals are becoming extinct or endangered, and the role they play in the ecosystem will no longer be fulfilled, and it will have greater effects on the rest of the planet. I explain this more in my video on YouTube called Seaspiracy. The world's climate experts are saying that the highest safe limit of emissions would be 350 parts per million of CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We are already at 400 parts per million. The highest safe mark limit without devastating consequences in terms of famine and mass species extinction would be a 2-degree temperature rise. We are already rapidly approaching that and will easily exceed it, which is why we've already started seeing the effects in the real world today. So things aren't looking too good. Calculations are now suggesting that even if we stopped using all gas, oil, or fuel ever again from this day forward, shut down coal factories, like the big industrial complexes you see in China and everything, shut it down from today, from this day forward, we would still exceed our maximum carbon equivalent greenhouse gas emissions of 565 gigatons by the year 2030, which is only 15 years away, all simply from raising and eating livestock animals. Okay. Livestock production is responsible for 65% of all human-related emissions of nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas with 296 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide, which stays in the atmosphere for 150 years, not to mention methane the animals produce, which is 25 to 100 times more destructive than CO2 over a 20-year time frame. And yet all we keep hearing from governments and apparent environmental organizations are only campaigns to combat CO2 emissions from transport rather than diet-related campaigns as well. As Dr. Richard Oppenlander has stated, the answer to achieving the highest level of relative sustainability can be found on our dinner plates. A UN study found that 13% of all greenhouse gases come from transport, whilst 18% came from livestock. And even that number was conservative and later found to be anywhere in the region of 30 to 51% of all greenhouse gases coming from livestock. And so any meaningful discussion about the state of the environment must begin with frank discussions about animal agriculture and also the rights of animals. Since if we disregard the plight of other animals whilst discussing ways to create a more sustainable, healthy, and compassionate world, and only focus on the term plant-based, then we have completely missed the point, in my opinion. Let's move to the next one. It would be like, and this may sound controversial, it would be like campaigning to end the Holocaust because the smoke from the gas chambers was causing some kind of environmental pollution, rather than the fact that this is an injustice in the first place. Again, I feel that our focus needs to shift to more ethics. And so we have to realize the question is now no longer, can humans survive on a vegan diet? That should be obvious by now. We're producing enough plant crops to feed the world several times over, and medical science is now backing the benefits of a whole food vegan diet. But rather the question should be, can we as humans and all other life on Earth survive if we don't make that needed change away from inefficient, unhealthy, and immoral animal farming, where we use the bodies of thinking, feeling animals for our own convenience? Okay, let's get that right. Now, I only probably have a few minutes to cover a hugely complex issue surrounding veganism and animal rights, and not to mention the health aspect of my own journey. So forgive me if it sounds like I'm skimming through a lot of the things, but hopefully I can find a way to connect the dots between them in an easy to understand way and explain how I came to be an activist. I wasn't always so concerned about the environment, or even animals for that matter. Just a few years ago, I used to be the biggest meat, dairy, and egg eater around, and I was paying the price with my health as well. At 16, I was 16 stone, and at 17, I was 17 stone. When I was 18, I was 18 stone. I was gaining a lot of weight every single year, and the bulk of my diet came from animal products. Until I finally discovered the benefits of eating a whole food vegan diet, after I realized, like, wait a minute, a chicken nugget is part of a dead body, and something didn't feel right about that. And it wasn't until I did that and started putting other beings' lives before my own convenience that in turn my own health started to become better as well. In fact, the more I moved towards a whole food vegan diet, the less acidic my body became, and this is exactly what is going on in the environment. With more animal agriculture, we're actually seeing high rates of acidification in the oceans, in the lakes, in the rivers, everything. It's a reflection of what we do as individuals has greater impacts on the environment, and it's almost directly correlated. And as this was all starting to happen, my outlook on life was beginning to be flipped upside down. And I decided that for whatever reason, university wasn't the path I wanted to take. And so on my own, at 18, I got on a plane to India, where I spent 6 months traveling the entire country up into Nepal, around the Himalayas, along the River Ganges, and immersed myself in a whole other culture. And you can see in this picture that after about 6 months to a year of eating only plant foods, I'd shifted all of that unhealthy weight, pretty much over the course of a couple of months. And it was led by an ethical focus. It gave me a lot of time to discover who I was and helped me to prioritize what I thought to be important in life. And the more I thought about it, the more urgent I realized veganism as a solution was. It was based on truth and compassion, or as they would say in India, ahimsa. After returning from my travels, I began exposing myself to horrific footage and terrifying information. And I was reading up on as many reports and studies as I could relating to a vegan diet, animal rights, and the environmental impact that humans are having. And after a year or two, I understood it was all connected. And I also slowly became friends with activists in my local area and in London. And before long, I was protesting in the streets and starting a YouTube channel to try and reach out to as many people as I could, both physically and online. So this is where I am now. I'm 22, and I've dedicated myself to spread this message as much as I can and in as many ways as I can, whether through social media, through talks, upcoming film projects I'll be working on, because the way I see it, if we don't decide to do something about this now, nature will decide for us, and it will not be in our favor. Plus, we will have the burden of guilt on our shoulders, and we won't be able to use the excuse and the luxury of saying that we didn't know. We have the internet these days, we can know everything. So before I finish this talk, I wanted to leave you all with something to think about. Whilst in India, I heard an old story about a blind man. He was walking towards a well, and close by there was a guy watching. Now, if the blind man falls in the well, is it the blind man's fault or is it the guy who's watching? Everyone in this room is now the guy who's watching our family and friends walk into this pit of destruction, and I believe we have an obligation to guide others and encourage them back into a state of awareness. So we've got to ask ourselves, what will the next 40 to 100 years look like? Thank you.